Hello and welcome back to On the Workbench. Today we're under the hood of a 3.2 liter inline six Volvo XC90 from 2013. And today we're going to be replacing the fuel pressure sensor because it has gone bad. So how do I know it went bad? Well, between the error codes that I'm getting, a P088 and a P0138, and then comparing the readings on my OBD2 scan tool to hooking up a fuel pressure gauge to the Schrader valve, which on this case here is actually located in the passenger, underneath the passenger side, about the rear passenger door, under the car by the fuel filter. I can screw on a fuel pressure gauge there and be able to compare the readings. And the readings I'm getting from just off the fuel pump compared to what I'm getting off of the pressure sensor here up at the front of the engine here are not the same. I mean, they are half the time, but there's definitely some irregularities between them that it seems to spike, and there's a little bit of an issue, and so I'm going to be changing that. That's my diagnostic process on how I got to this arrival. Your process may vary. The tools that you're going to need for this project are going to be as follows. First, I'm going to use some super lube to grease the gasket or the O-ring on the new part, and then really it comes down to, after that, removing one T25 Torx screw. So a couple options here to do that. Number one is going to be a set of Torx keys. And make sure you've got the T25 Torx. Now, a Torx key will probably work. Another option that you may want to use is to have if you've got a 1/4-inch drive reversible ratchet. This is a little Blackhawk ratchet of mine, and I took a little bit of duct tape, wrapped it around it so I could kind of use it to help retain the bit. And so that will give you an option. Now, the space you have to work on is going to be really, really tight. So we're going to have to think a little outside the box about some other tricks. So one of the other tricks that also you may, depending on how strongly you feel about this, is if you use a T20 Torx and you put it on an extension, then after it's at least broken free using something like this or a Torx key, then that gives you a little bit of wiggle room to come in at a slight angle on that T25 fastener to be able to remove it. So I know some people might cry foul with this, but trust me, it works. You can also fit about an 1/8-inch flathead screwdriver into the little edges of the T25 Torx to help to spin it. Whether you want to go shorter or much, much longer. This is, I don't know, about a 10-inch long, 1/8-inch drive screwdriver, flathead screwdriver. And so something like that to get it out, because the real trick, there's only one screw to remove, is just getting it out, and the amount of space you have is not very much. And one of the problems that you may be thinking, well, what about one of these little bit ratchets like this? Well, the problem is, so this works, but because of the way these bits sit like this, that this is too much space and does not fit. However, this does fit, and you can see how it can fit. And there's that much extra space taken up by the ratchet. Now, obviously, when you're working on the engine, a couple other things we're going to want. Safety glasses, probably want a flashlight to help us see. And that's really it. So give yourself maybe 10, 15 minutes worth of time, and you're good. The other tool that I don't have here is you're going to want to have some clean rags because we are dealing with the fuel pressure, the fuel system. We want to make sure we get the fuel contained, that we don't turn this into a fire risk, and we're able to keep the engine nice and clean and pretty, and then we're good to go. So the other tool that you may want is a fuel pressure tester. This is part of my OTC kit. There's a couple adapters here that you have to use to be able to connect onto this. But I was able to connect this onto the Quick Connect port that on my XC90 is located basically under the rear passenger door, but under the body right by the fuel filter. And then once I connect this on, I could give a quick glance at the gauge here to see what the pressure is, at least at the fuel filter, and to know that that was correct, to be able to compare against my OBD2 scan data and be able to say, oh, well, it's actually the sensor that's not reading the same as the gauge. Obviously, it means that you got to decide, do you trust the gauge or do you trust the OBD2 data? trust both of them, but my check in the middle was when I saw the gauge staying steady, but the pressure reported by the sensor to be varying on the OBD2 live display. That was my clue that I can probably trust my pressure gauge and my OBD2 sensor, and then go ahead and make the call to replace the part. So the parts you're going to need for this is going to be one primary part. The part I ended up picking up as a replacement is a Bosch. It goes for maybe between $50 and $60, give or take, and very simply made. We've got our we have our fuel sensor. We've got a barb here on the end. Notice that we're going to use a little flathead screwdriver to pop the little clip off to remove the wiring. Then the back side here is our sensor. Importantly here, you can see there's this blue rubber O-ring. So that's really important because we're going to have to lube that O-ring up to make sure we get a really good seal, because the last thing we want is fuel coming out. In my opinion, it'd be nice if they gave us the O-ring separately off the unit from on it. And then now to lube it up, I'm going to use my Super Lube grease. This is a food quality grease that should be safe for this. Let's take just a little bit dab on my fingertip here. And I'm just going to spread this around. I should make sure that the O-ring will give us a really good fit so we don't have fuel spilling out where we don't want it. And make sure our O-ring is already lubed up and ready to go. And that's where we're going to be dealing with the fuel system. It's going to be important that we can get this piece in as quickly as we can after we get the old one out. So that's all lubed up and ready to go. Let's go back over to the car and prepare to remove the old part and install this. So the first thing we got to do in this car is we have to remove the engine cover here. And this lifts off. You may have to remove the oil tank cap and then put that back after you're done. And we will set that aside. And so the part we're looking at is actually this gray part right here. We got the silver fuel rail here. And then right here is the part in question. And so, like I said earlier, when I was talking about the rags, the fuel in here is going to be about 55 to 60 PSI. So we're going to have to be somewhat cognizant of that. And then now the first thing I'm going to do is to remove the wiring harness. So I've got a pocket screwdriver here that I've got to be able to remove the little tab here on this clip to get over the barb to remove the wiring connector. Just use my flathead screwdriver, lift up on that. I'm going to pull that out and push this aside. Get that out of the way. Now I've got some access underneath here to be able to get some rags placed. And right back here, it's almost a blind screw, is a T25 Torx screw. And so that's going to be what we're going to have to loosen to remove this part. And then we'll just swap in the new part straight ahead. So the tip of my fingertip here, hopefully you can see on the camera, is exactly where the screw is. It's fairly tight confines for getting a tool in there. I've got enough extra rag here on top I can put on top whenever I feel the pressure about to break, and I have my safety glasses on. All right, so you can see I got my rag here laid out. My T25 screw is right there. I'm not sure if you can see that. I'm going to take my T25 Torx key, and then it'll take me a second here to get this aligned. All right, so now with the Allen key installed there, all right, I heard it move. It's going to probably take another turn or two to get this broken free. Be mindful of the risk of fuel. And because we're talking about the fuel system here, cleanliness does count as best as possible, as well as expediency. And now maybe you're able to see, let me just lean this over here. You can see where we've got the top of this blue O-ring coming out here. That's the fuel pressure pushing this out. So we've got to be really careful getting close to this breaking free. A couple more turns at the bit ratchet and we should have this out, I hope. Now at this point, I'm just going to continue to be patient. Emphasis on patient here as I turn my hex key here, or one of the other instruments I showed you earlier in the video, working to get that screw out here. The screw actually falls out and I have to use my magnetic pickup tool to be able to get it. Luckily I have my rag to be able to successfully catch it. There it is, there's the screw. And so now that we got the screw out and the part's completely loose, now I want to make sure I get my other part ready as I go ahead and wrap up and remove the old part right there. As it's out, I'm going to try to catch anything dripping out of the fuel rail, just to try to catch everything. I got the new part ready to go to turn this around as quickly as I can and go ahead and drop that in. This is why it's important. You want to make sure you get that O-ring looped up pretty quickly early on as you begin this process, so you're not wasting time right now lubing it up as I go to just press it right in. It'll be a little bit of a snug fit, and remember it's secured just by that one single screw. So now you got to get that screw back and fish it in. If only there was a little more space back there for the screw. That's why you might want to resort back to the bag of tricks of using a T20 placed at an angle. I'm switching this out now here just for some clean cloths here underneath, just to keep everything clean. I'm trying to be a little extra cautious when I'm playing with the fuel rail here. They don't introduce any accidental contamination or otherwise damage the electrical connector that's attached to the sensor. And so now it's a matter of getting that screw back into the hole and then going ahead and tightening it up. And so a little bit of patience goes a long way here for making this happen. I'm going to go ahead and start it off by hand because I don't want to cross thread this at all. That would really be a nightmare to have to try to fix. So just a little quick hand start, and then we'll get back out other tool options to try to get this all the way back in and seat the screw. Having to turn it there just between a couple fingers, getting creative on how I can turn a screw with almost literally no space. And then we'll go back for the hex key, put the hex key in, make sure you get it seated properly all the way into the head of the screw. And in this case here, righty-tighty means going from the bottom up and lifting up on the key. And so go ahead and do that a number of times to try to tighten it up. And then once you feel snug with it, then you're going to be good. And after you're good, go ahead and reconnect your electrical connection and then call it a day. Obviously, you need to verify your fix. You're going to need to make sure that there's no fuel leaking out. All right, so now I went back and clicked on my wire. It's going to be important here that as I finish up everything, that before I start the car, that I verify that this is tight right here. And after I start the car, the first thing I'm going to be doing to verify is make sure that there's no leaks. And right over here, there's no fuel coming out, because that would be a serious issue if fuel were to come out. And so that's my number one issue I got to verify for. Once I verify that that's good, then we're all set to go and the repair is good. Obviously, I'm going to verify again with my fuel readings and everything else to go with it. Other than that, pretty simple. Needs about 30 minutes of your time, give or take, and most of it's spent just putting that screw in here. And just as a quick aside, as far as I'm aware, there's not an official torque spec on the one screw that holds it in. Just give it a good and you should be good. If you can remember what it feels like coming off, just try to repeat that going back in. And so with that, pretty simple. If you got any questions or comments, put it down below. If you like content like this, give it a thumbs up, click the subscribe button if you haven't already done so. Thanks for watching, and as always, have a great day. Bye.